All right, so today we are going to talk about the next core principle of our communication system. So typically we start with our reinforcement piece and our rewards. So that was where our last video walked us through how we implement a system of markers in order to create clarity and increase the value of our rewards for our dogs. Now we're going to start looking at how we layer in pressure in order to kind of balance out our behavior shaping and creating reliability in behavior. So diving right in, what is pressure? So pressure is a form of negative reinforcement. So we need to brush up on what the core principles of conditioning are. Take a look at that video in our video library, because that will walk you through what positive reinforcement, negative punishment, and positive punishment all mean in a scientific sense, and that will bring you kind of up to speed for this video. However, since we're going to be focusing on negative reinforcement, I'll do a quick summary of that. So basically, negative reinforcement, the negative is talking about the removal of something, and reinforcement is meaning to encourage the frequency or the likelihood of a behavior. So in negative reinforcement, we are typically removing an uncomfortable stimulus in order to generate behavior rather than stop a behavior. So when we're talking about pressure, we're going to start, there's a few different versions of pressure, but we're really going to focus on two today because we're going to be focusing largely on how the leash fits into this, but we're going to be talking about tactile pressure and spatial pressure. So largely with the leash, we're going to be using mainly tactile pressure. So that in a nutshell is just going to be like applying tension to the leash, and the release of that tension is going to be what is reinforcing to the dog. So that being said, we'll kind of show you what that looks like in a practical sense. So with Sprite, I'm first going to walk through one of the key drills that we do to teach an understanding of directional leash pressure. So this drill is called Follow Me, Yield to Me, and so it's teaching the dog what to do when they feel that leash pressure and building an understanding that that is asking them to do something specific and not just a feeling that happens at random. So when I use the leash to ask the dog to follow me, I'll be adding tension, looking for the dog to move directionally towards me. And then I'll walk you through what we're doing with the yield to me as well, because that's kind of step two. So beginning with the follow me piece, you can see I want Sprite, the goal is to have her move with me, not way out ahead, not way up to the side, not way behind. So if she starts to get outside of this little bubble that I'm working her in, I apply a little bit of pressure. I like it to be very lateral to ask her to move with the direction of the leash. So she's an old pro at this. But if we're looking to move right and she were to not already be following, I'd be applying that pressure in a nice straight line from her neck in the direction I want her to go. And then as soon as she moves in that direction, I'd be using what we call a release. So I like to use a very active release. And basically what that means is I apply pressure to manipulate the movement of her body, and then I kind of shove the leash back at her so she feels a very dynamic feeling of a loosening of that pressure. So I'll do it from here to see if we can get a little bit better of a demo since she's very focused. But if I want her to move this way and I apply that pressure here, good. As soon as she starts to make a move in the direction that I want, I'm gonna position that release right at the beginning. I'm looking more for intent than perfect movement. So if my goal is to move her towards the camera, yes, good girl. Then I'm applying and give as soon as she shows a little effort to figure out what I'm asking. Good. Good. So that's a little more advanced than what you would want to be doing with your dog, but because she's already very quick to follow, I want you to just kind of see what the mechanics of that look like. So if I want to move to the right and I want her to move with me, good. I'm going to add a little pressure to the right and give. Good girl. See if I can set that up again. Here, apply, give. Apply, give. Oops, it's a little messy, but yeah, good girl. Very good. All right, and then so when we start looking into the yield to me piece of the equation, we will be moving towards our dog. So it's basically if our dog is on the left, that'll be our left turn. So my follow me is when I move to the right. Good girl. And my yield to me is when I move to the left into her. So this is where we're starting to use some spatial pressure because it's creating movement away from my body rather than movement just in towards my body. So this will be really good because it helps balance out some of that forging that a lot of people see. So, if we're dealing with a dog that pulls on leash, it kind of positions your dog behind you. You can really only work that yield to me piece when the dog is just behind your leg. I'm going to show you what I mean. So basically, if Sprite were way out here and I try to get her to yield, she's not really going to be able to do that in a way that I can make a full turn. So I need to be anticipating early and using the leash to block her from getting too far ahead and then moving into her. So then that follow me piece would be me moving away. Good. And yield to me moving into her. And so when you're beginning to work these drills, I would set up exactly like we have here where she's kind of in her home base. There aren't a lot of distractions. She's really able to focus and build this skill first before we try and go out to a public park or something where there's lots of distractions, whether it's squirrels or odor, other people, other dogs. And I just want my dog to be able to move with me in the way that Sprite was and show a clear understanding of what that leash pressure is asking for. So if you have a dog like Sprite who is already following really nicely with your lead, then we can start layering into some of our layering into some of our positions as well. So I'll probably do another short clip with another dog so you can see a little bit more of what that follow me, yield to me looks like with a dog who isn't quite as far along in their training. But with Sprite, I can show you how we can use pressure to help the dog into position. So the first one I always do is sit. Good. And so when we're starting to layer this into position, you'll notice I'm not giving verbal cues to the dog. I'm just using the leash to ask them to find the position that I'm looking for. So I'll show you again with Sprite, but we'll get moving. I'm going to ask her for a sit again, but I'm not going to use any verbal. All I'm going to do is use a little upward motion on the leash. As soon as I see her butt start to drop, that's where I give that big release of pressure with the leash. So I'm making it very dramatic, but that is exactly how it should be in your training. It's not just for the video. Good girl. Good. And we can do the exact same thing for the down as well. We clearly practice this drill a little bit. Good girl. So I'm using the same principles that I was using with my marker words as well, where if I've given her this tactile cue into position, I'm still having her wait until I've either cued her into another position or released her with a verbal marker. So with her, because I'm not working with food just yet, I'll give an okay or a go. Go. Good girl. And I'll show one more time with the down. Good girl. And so as you can see, even though with negative reinforcement we're working towards the removal of something that's uncomfortable to the dog, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's heavily aversive, or that the dog is following that pressure because they are worried about the pressure itself. So with Sprite, she's built such an understanding of what this pressure system means that she's really just following through with the removal of pressure for two reasons. One, because she understands and she knows how to do it now, so it's become habitual. And the other reason is that we've also layered rewards in. So often it's very positively reinforcing as well for her to turn off that pressure. So that's actually the next step I'd like to walk through, is how we can take this pressure system and not only use it to physically manipulate the dog into behaviors, but also how we can use that to increase drive, motivation, and enthusiasm in behavior. So assuming you have a food motivated dog, this is how I would layer in food with it. It is possible to do with toys or personal play or affection, but for the sake of ease, I'll just be showing with food today. So with Sprite, we'll start a little bit with just our follow me, yield to me work and how I would layer food into that. So let's go. So I can basically make my order of operations: apply pressure, release of pressure, and food. We may have to take a different drill for this one. So yeah, this is gonna work. All right, we'll do position. So if I pop her and do it down. Good. So on this, you can see she's starting to predict the pressure. I don't even need to put it on anymore. Yes. In order for her to start looking to complete the behavior, she's looking for the quickest way to that reward, and that pressure is giving her direction that enables her to earn that reward. So for her, this pressure work is actually very rewarding because we've created a predictable system of using this pressure to guide her into the things that motivate her and that she would like access to. So I'll do another demonstration probably with Faith as well, because she has a little less education and a little lower drive, so it'll be a little clearer what we're looking at when we're really adding in early pressure use. But you get the idea with Sprite that we're able to do a whole lot of communicating just with the leash in order to guide into behaviors in a way that still maintains the dog's drive and excitement. So in this particular video, you can see I've just got her on a slip leash. These principles of pressure and release to guide the dog into varying behaviors, they are not necessarily tool specific. So, however, they are principles that can be layered into almost any tool. So, a slip lead is usually my preferred starting point with dogs when we're using the leash to teach the mechanics of leash pressure and in order to guide the dog into positions, largely just because it's very simple, easy to use, has a very active release. So if you're not super familiar with slip leashes, basically they are just a leash with a loop on the end rather than a snap to a flat collar, and they will tighten and loosen as you have tension on the leash. And the reason that I would want to use that in the training stage is so that the dog learns that tightening, so that pressure is asking for something, and then when we give that release, it has a very dramatic feel for the dog because that pressure is dispersed all the way around the neck, versus having something like a flat collar where all of that pressure is going to be either just below or just behind. So for me, the slip leash is very simple and low impact, but with a lot of clarity. Things like prong collars, e-collars, these tools, gentle leaders, halter systems, they use the same mechanics of pressure and release. These tools use the same mechanics of pressure and release, but we would implement them for varying reasons and varying goals. So they may offer more finesse in certain topics, or they may be a better fit for the dog. The dog may experience more clarity. So, what tool is being used is really dependent on the goal and the dog themselves and the handler, but the principles of how we're using them remains the same. So the only tool that I would probably discourage using for some of these drills that we've just shown is a harness, just because it lacks some level of clarity, because say we were to use that upward pressure for a sit on a harness, the pressure, if it was a back clip harness, the pressure would actually be coming from up underneath the elbows, which would be confusing for the dog. It's not as intuitive as upward pressure on just the neck is for the dog to drop their butt. Same idea. You're so naughty. Same idea for the down position. So if we were to use downward pressure on a harness, it's likely, if it's a back clip harness again, it's likely to twist, which is again it's going to throw the dog off balance, and it's going to make it a little more challenging for them to understand that directional piece of using pressure. It's possible to do, but I just find it's not the smoothest tool for teaching this. If you have questions about that, feel free to email me, happy to answer. But yeah, and so that being said, it's not any one specific tool. There's lots of ways you can implement a pressure system. My start into using pressure was largely through my work with horses. So in that case, we're looking at things like reins on a bit on a bridle, using your legs to apply and release pressure to give directional cues. It gets very complex when working in systems with riding horses. So I won't even dive into that, but just to really outline how versatile pressure is and how non-specific it is. It can be applied to many, many things. So the last things that I want to talk about is really why we would use pressure and the benefits of it. So I've gone over some already. So one is that we can kind of increase the value of our rewards by creating more anticipation, which we talked about in our marker video as well. So I wouldn't say that pressure is used as a marker. It's more of a cue into behavior once the dog understands it. But typically this will build anticipation in the dog because it is another thing that is letting the dog know that they are, the window of opportunity has opened for them to earn the reward. So we tend to see with dogs that are taught on a pressure system that their motivation increases when used properly. And they have more enthusiasm and speed in their behaviors. Another benefit to it, which runs a little bit counter to that detail, is that dogs that are fairly low motivation or not, particularly food motivated or motivated in a way that makes it easy for us to shape behaviors, we are then able to use this separate form of communication to start shaping behaviors. So if I have a dog that really doesn't have any interest in working for food, doesn't have a lot of toy drive, it doesn't leave us nearly as many options for teaching, and so it can be a very low impact way of teaching the dog to move with you and just work for that release of pressure. Typically your results are a little less flashy and the speed of which the dog goes into behavior is a little slower, but you can still teach the mechanics, and if you're lucky, you'll actually see an increase in motivation for your rewards as well. So there's a spectrum among dogs of how highly motivated they can be, but for our low motivation guys, it can be a huge tool to help owners still create a strong communication system with their dog and to potentially up the level of motivation their dog has for typical rewards. Another big piece that I really love about pressure work, which you've seen me layer in a little bit as I walk through this video, but so you don't require that verbal communication in order to communicate to your dog what you would like them to do. So I don't have to break it all in speaking in order to ask my dog to sit or to lay down. It enables me to multitask a little bit better. So especially for those of you who really want to take your dog out into the real world, say you want to have your dog go with you to breweries, or you want to go get coffee and sit out on a bench in the park and just have your dog relax with you. You're able to carry on a conversation while still giving feedback to your dog if they start to get agitated, or in my case, if they start to pester you for rewards. And so you can offer that gentle guidance without having to break in conversation to manage your dog. And so along with that, tactile work like this, it actually is much clearer to dogs than verbal communication. So as we know, dogs aren't verbal. A lot of that dependence on verbal communication comes from our preferences in communication, not the dogs. So naturally dogs have some vocalizations that they use to communicate, but much more of their language is in body language and spatial pressure and tactile interactions. So your dog is going to have a skewed preference towards responding to tactile feedback and spatial and social feedback than just verbal words. Words and cues have to be taught to the dog. They're not inherently valuable in the way that they typically tend to be for us, being so dependent on language. So there's many more benefits to using a pressure system, but those are kind of the biggies for most people who are getting started in kind of building their core foundations to work up to higher complexity skills. And they can really be layered into any level of skill building, whether you're working towards building fun, complex behaviors, or if you are looking to create some behavioral tools to implement in your behavior modification plan. So we'll definitely have more videos that cover how pressure is further integrated into the behavior shaping system, or how we use it to create reliability, or how we layer it in with other tools down the line. But for now, here's just kind of the quick and dirty overview of what pressure is, how we use it, and where the possibilities begin as far as using this as a core foundation of your communication system. All right, so round 2 with Faith. So I'm going to take a moment to demonstrate that follow me, yield to me drill a little more with her, adding it in for our sit and our down as well. This is not a communication system that we have integrated a lot of fluency for Faith, so she should be a reasonably good example of what a novice dog would look like when starting to work through these skills. So Faith has done a lot of food related work. She's very sensitive to something like social pressure. So because she is just kind of a generally chill, easygoing dog, we haven't focused quite as much on building strong obedience skills in the way we have with our other dogs. She's much more of our couch potato pet dog. But I'll take a moment to just kind of walk you through what our follow me, yield to me. So here, good, applying pressure as she chooses to go a different direction. Good. Good. So you can see I'm very light with my application pressure. Good girl. She's a little sensitive. Good girl. Good. Good. Here, add pressure. Good. Adding pressure here. Good. Big release. Yield into her a little bit. You notice how I blocked her with the leash so that she wasn't able to get all the way out ahead. Good. She's a little behind me. I'd like her to move forward. So this is actually a really common trap people get into with leash pressure work, especially if they have kind of sensitive dogs like Faith. I'm going to ask her, good, to move towards me. If she starts to lag really behind, I want to be really careful that I only apply enough pressure to move her forward a bit. Good. So a lot of people, what they'll do, good, is to continue adding pressure just because their dog is slow, even though their dog is moving forward. So what you're really doing there is you're not rewarding your dog for moving forward. Adding pressure, give. Adding pressure, give. Good. And so I'm actually going to do a couple of things. So you're seeing there's a little resistance to that pressure. A lot of that is because Faith is just very sensitive to really anything on her body. So she has a hard time with like wearing things. So if we try to put like a jacket or a sweater on her, she tends to freeze. So she's very quick when she is uncertain to kind of push back into pressure rather than yield to it. So I'm just going to wait. Notice I have a nice straight line from my hand to her that is parallel with the ground. So I don't need to get super worried here. I'm not going to like increase my pressure or go really heavily. If she really sits back, I might add a little more just to encourage her to move into it. Good. 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 I'm going to start to pull food in. Good. There we go. And add a little motivator there. So because she is less responsive to the pressure work, yes, I'm going to start layering in food rewards in order to help drive her to want to proceed with the action. So, I could just continue Yes, habitually working her through following pressure by itself, and that could get me the final result I'm looking for too, but you can see the change in her attitude. She wants to follow with that pressure now that she is seeing that as an opportunity. So, you know, a lot of times I'd like to be able to do both. I want my dog to know how to respond to the pressure without the presence of the reward, but I also want my dog to have a high quality behavior as well. So you'll notice I've been a little inconsistent with it because of the sake of talking for the video, but I'm going to mark those moments as well. So here, if I do the right turn, yes, add pressure. As soon as she follows, I'm giving that yes marker. So good girl, add, yes, good. She perks right after that. Oops, watch out. Good girl. Good. Start guiding into positions now that she's really with me. Good girl. So I use my good marker because I didn't break her out yet. Yes. Good girl. Notice I'm not telling her anything. I'm letting the leash do the talking. Yes. Good girl. Good. Yes. Good girl. We'll play around this down. I'm not sure we've done this with her, so let's see how it goes. And this one I may actually use the food to help shape her into behavior because I want her to start good looking at that pressure as a cue and not just something to tolerate. Little elbows, not on the ground. Down. Good. So I helped her out a little bit because down is a known behavior to her already. So I'm using that known behavior in order to teach her what the pressure means and not the other way around. So, you know, teaching something like pressure work, it's not specifically your obedience cues, and obedience can be very helpful, having things like a sit and a down and a stand and heel. These are all valuable tools, but the underlying systems that we use to build those tools can have a lot more value to us in the long run. Because we can then adapt those to anything. So a sit is just a sit, a down is just a down. It can't really be adapted into other things, but these principles of shaping behavior can then be used in many applications. So I'll see how she develops through this. I'll release her with a get it. Good girl. And we'll try this again. A little downward pressure, and I'm just gonna wait. And if that doesn't work, I'll help with the food first. And you can see once she realized the food was in the picture, she starts good, trying to volunteer unknown behavior. That's why she sat there. Get it? Good girl. Try it again without food in the picture. Yes, good girl. Get it? Little sloppy markers on my part, but still functional. Ready? Using that pressure downward. Yes, get it. Good girl. All right, I'm gonna reset and do it again and see if we can do it without the food being in the picture at all. Downward pressure. I've changed the picture by standing up as well, so that's something that is very much worth noting, is any change in your setup will be relevant to the dog. So she's saying this is a whole new puzzle since you are standing above me now. I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna give her a chance to problem solve on her own. Nope. Down. Good. Get it. So I'm kind of alternating where sometimes I may choose to give her the verbal cue rather than bring out the food. And that's largely strategic because I think she's kind of seeing if she waits it out, if I'll kind of show her the money. Get it. And I want her to be able to do this when food is also not in the picture, even though I'm largely, yes, get it, going to be rewarding. And this means that the dog is learning that even when they don't see the reward during the moment you're asking for a behavior, they are still under the assumption that that reward is possible. Yes, get it. So I'm going to start transferring, let's go, that pressure work into a down without my hand being down there. So the way I do that is I put my foot over the leash. I'm still very light with it. Actually, I'll just need her slip a little higher just for sake of clarity. We're not putting a lot of pressure on here, just enough that she's really feeling it. Down. Okay. Good. Yes. Get it. Good girl. And we'll try that again. So basically the goal of this is to fade out that dramatic lure with my hands. I want her to be thinking just about the leash, not about the rest of my body. I'm just gonna wait. It's a patience game here. Yes! Good girl. Do it again. Faith is one to test. She likes to see if I'm going to make it easier on her. She's always looking for the easiest way to the food. Yes! Good girl. Let's see if we can get that to speed up a little bit now that it's clear. Okay, let's go. Good girl. Use it right here. And eventually what you'll see is a lot of times dogs will start to position themselves in a down as you pick your foot up, because that's becoming an earlier cue for them that this is the desired behavior. So you'll notice that my line here is a little down and forward to help encourage the dog to drop at the shoulder. You can do it. Yes, good girl. So even when it takes a while, you'll notice that my reward hasn't changed at all. I'm just as excited and I'm still rewarding these slow reps. Yes, because that's what's going to build that speed ultimately. It's not, oh, when you have a slow rep, the reward comes slower. Come here. Good. I want them to go, ooh, laying down has super value. Yes, good girl. Has a super amount of value, and I'm going to work harder in order to do that. So and that's all I'm going to demonstrate with Faith, but she gives you a little bit clearer of a picture of what it looks like for a more novice dog to start learning a pressure system, or for a dog that's a little more resistant to pressure, which Faith kind of is overall. And as we don't have nearly as many goals with her as I do with my other dogs, we kind of don't mind that that's the case. But it does hold us back in building some stronger behaviors in the long run, better leash walking skills. And so it's super valuable to start building these in your dog early, because then you're able to manipulate these pieces of pressure into other goals and skills down the line.